Greetings. Welcome to the Money Script Podcast. I'm your host, Johanse Harrison, financial advisor and financial literacy educator. In each episode, you'll hear incredible interviews and get tips and strategies that you can implement into your daily life to help you improve your money script and grow your wealth. Thank you for taking some time with me today. Let's get into this episode of the Money Script. And with that, welcome everyone to the Money Script Podcast. Season 2 is underway. It's also I think it's the first day of fall. It might be, but by the time you're hearing this, it's already fall. I mean, it's probably just been a week or something like that. It's not going to be that long because season 2 is underway. So excited. I'm so excited about our guest today, my good friend Mikko, whom I met, I don't know, at least 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago.
Sounds right.
4 years ago. She had the pleasure of attending one of my financial literacy courses at LMU. Shout out to LMU. Thank you for that opportunity to continue to help individuals learn more about financial literacy and making better financial decisions. And we're going to talk about one of the most important and frequently made decisions by many Americans today, or not just Americans. I'm sure this happens all over the world, but I know some countries have some different banking rules. But I'm talking about buying a car, and it's something that I get questioned about often. Should I buy my next car? Should I lease my next car? How much should I spend on the car? What's the right type of car? So we're going to get into some of those norms, if you will, of car buying. But Mikko just had an incredible experience. I guess incredible is the way I'm going to describe it. I'll let her tell a little bit of the story, but with no further ado, Mikko, go ahead and introduce yourself, and then let's get into this interesting, incredible journey that you had over the past 2 or 3 weeks of getting a new car.
Maybe a little bit more than that, but thank you, Johans. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Mikko. I'm 22 years old. I graduated from LMU in May, and I currently work for the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. So that's just a little bit about me and where I'm at right now.
You are young. I think you might be our youngest guest to date.
Oh, yes. Well, that's great. I'm glad I'm starting off young.
There you go. Just imagine when this is heard like 25 years in the future, and you're like, oh yeah, I was 22. I was a little baby. That's how you refer to yourself. That's how I refer to my 22-year-old self. I was just a baby.
Yeah. When you came to speak to us at LMU, I remember I was like 18, I'm pretty sure. I was like a freshman, and I was so scared of everything you were saying. You were speaking of credit cards and debt and getting your savings together, and I just remember being really frightened.
Gee, you were a freshman. I think it had to have been, you must have been a rising sophomore, maybe. Is that what you were going into your sophomore year?
Probably. Maybe okay. I was a little more acclimated with LMU. But I just remember, it had to be 18, 19, and I was just like really afraid. That was before I became a finance major. So
that is true.
And just like being a little more comfortable with looking into my finances, like it was a big reason why I became a finance major. So, and where I am today. So it's very interesting.
So you were a finance major in college, but prior to deciding to become a finance major, what did you think you wanted to do or be?
Yeah, it's a good question. I came in as an economics major. I feel like that's a really a state of like limbo with a lot of students. It's either that or like political science when you don't really know what you want to do. So that was me. I did not know what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to be a doctor. I was siding more with the lawyer side, but that's just because of my parents. So I was still trying to figure it out, actually.
Yeah, we used to say back in the day, major poli sci when you don't know why you're here. So that was a real thing. So, but going, okay, so let's go back to then high school and growing up. I mean, LMU is a prestigious college to be accepted into. So first of all, congratulations. But I mean, what was driving you to make the decision to go to LMU? I mean, are you even from LA?
No, I'm not from LA. I'm from Chicago, actually. And this is a really easy question. I got into LMU. One, it was the first school I visited, and it was just beautiful. And it was unmatched to any of like the Midwest schools I was visiting at the time. And my brother lived out here, so kind of like there was only like pluses on this end. But the main reason was because I got accepted into the student worker program. And those were the students that you actually came to speak to, like the student workers. I know you know them. And basically, in that program, they pay for housing and they give you a job all 4 years. And that was like the decision for me because I knew I was going to need to get a job. And, I'm, I come from a very middle class family. My mom is a nurse, and my dad at the time was a caretaker. So I knew I needed to pick up my own weight if I really wanted to make this move. And my parents were super supportive, but I didn't want them to have to handle everything. So when I got accepted into that program, I knew for sure that this is the school I wanted to go to. It was like meant to be.
Got it. Got it. Okay. I hope you're hearing this, students, and shout out to all the LMU students because I'm working with the class this year as well. So I'm sure a lot of them are going to hear this. And shout out to Jade over at the Student Workers Program. It was Jade that actually brought me in for the first time. And that's how I started teaching at LMU, which was awesome. Thank you, Jade. But I love what I heard there because what it sounds like is that you had a tremendous opportunity that was going to take a lot of risk. It was going to, you're going to move 5 states over. Now, mind you, you probably, they probably had you visit California in like November, December, or January. So you went from 0 degrees to 70 degrees. And you're like, oh yeah, this is the life to live where it's 70
Yeah.
degrees all the time. So I get it. Now, but the decision to join the student workers program to work your way through school, I mean that's an incredible decision. I honor you for that. I wish a lot more students would think about their education career in that way because it really helps you come out of school with a lot less debt, especially going to a private school. I mean, private
Yes.
schools aren't cheap. This is America. So the decision to work your way through it and the fact that you had the skill set, you had the discipline to be able to do that is tremendous. So hats off to you. Now, where do you remember your first memory of money or when you realized that money was a thing to be spent, to be saved, to be thrown away?
Yeah. Oh, totally. I started working when I was 14, like an official job. Before it was like side jobs. I'd help fill in for my aunts and uncles who were also caretakers. But I always knew in high school I needed to get a job because I went to a private high school as well. And I was very used to like my parents not being around because they worked a lot. So it was really just me, and my siblings were already off doing their own thing. So, in order to keep up with the private high school lifestyle, to put it in simpler terms, I had to make my own money so I can go out with my friends and I could do things. So I started working when I was 14 as a waitress at a bar called, at the time, Snuggery. It is not called that anymore, but it was in Elmhurst, Illinois.
It
Um,
sounds like that name doesn't age well.
yeah, I think it's now like a blanket or something. But anyway, yeah, I was a waitress, and I actually started off as a hostess. And then when I turned 16, I became a waitress. And then, yeah, so I did that for quite a while, actually. And that was when I first was introduced to having my own money. And I loved it. I loved the idea. It was really nice not having to ask my parents for like money for weekly things. And it also just gave me something to do outside of the house. So yeah, I really liked that.
So when did you get your first car?
Okay, so when I went, I just kind of used my parents' car when I was in high school. It was a Prius. Actually, at first it was a 98 Nissan Pathfinder, but that broke down. And then I got a Prius, but that was already my mom's car. So if I would say the first time I got a car in my name was in college, sophomore year. Um, I realized I needed a car if I wanted to have internships, kind of like yours. And so my mom flew over here, and at the time her credit wasn't great due to other circumstances, and hadn't built my credit yet. So the reason why we leased the car actually is because the monthly payments were lower. Ideally, we didn't want to do that. We knew that it wasn't the greatest financial decision, but for us at the time, like that's what we could afford. So I leased a 2017 Honda Civic when I was a sophomore, and it was in both my mom and my name.
Got it. And that was the vehicle that you drove to your first day as an intern for actually MoneyScript Wealth Management back in the day.
Yeah,
And if I remember correctly, you did not make it to work that day.
I made no, I made it to work. I didn't make it
You
home
didn't make it
right
home.
away.
That's what it was. It was one of those. It was like something went wrong that day. I knew it was one of the other. Okay, there it is.
I literally got hit by a bus. That's like the actual literal term. I actually got hit by a bus, which was very tragic.
And by bus, you mean not you were tired, meaning a city bus rammed into your car.
Yes, a
Oh,
city bus. Yes, ran into my car.
there.
I was stopped, so that was good that I wasn't actually moving. And he was just making a turn, so it wasn't anything like a huge collision. But for the most part, that was a huge expense to get my car fixed on their end. I did not have to pay anything.
That's good. Shout out
Yeah.
to insurance. All right. So,
Yeah.
now you mentioned that was a lease, and you said that that wasn't the smartest decision. What is it about leasing that you think makes it not a smart decision?
Um, okay. So actually I did not know any better. Honestly, I just wanted a car. My parents were the ones that were like, no, we shouldn't lease, but like this is all we can afford. So they actually were the ones like the pioneers of the idea, like to me, that buying is always better. And my mom has bought a couple cars like in her lifetime. She always used to say that she would go to a dealership and she would never leave without a car because they're just so good with getting her. So I actually didn't know anything about a lease like off the bat. To me, it just sounded like I was getting a car and I was paying the monthly payments, which were low. And that's like all I cared about, actually.
Got it. Got it. And ladies and gentlemen, that is why the car industry thrives the way it does, and sometimes, unfortunately, takes advantage of people because people, I mean, we want what we want, and sometimes we need, as Mikko was saying, if she wanted to be able to have access to internships that were off campus in Los Angeles, it's not New York people. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
but when it comes to public transportation, LA has not been known for having the best. And so, yeah, having a car, I mean, most people know that in LA, it's essential to have a car. I mean, now in the pandemic, it has been a little bit better, I guess, for most because they don't have to go, but still LA cars become essential. So it kind of creates a breeding ground of taking advantage of people, which we are going to talk about a lot more here really soon. So, I just wanted to speak on the leasing because yes, it does get a bad rap, and leasing has its place for different individuals, and it really just depends on your situation. The way I look at it is if I fly into a city where I don't live and I need to get transportation, I'm going to go to the local dealership. I say in air quotations, meaning it's a car rental place. And I'm going to say, I would like to lease a vehicle from you for the next 5 days. And they say, pick out your car, Mr. Harrison. And I pick the car and they tell me what the cost will be per day, give them a credit card or some sort of deposit. And they tell me to bring it back in the same condition it was in, plus whatever mileage that I drive. They expect I put miles on it, but they also may tell me not to go outside of the state or pay more. But that's my lease agreement. And when I'm done, I bring the car back and I give them the keys and they hand me a bottle of water and send me on my plane. That's it. I don't get anything. I borrowed the car for a specified amount of time at a specified rate, and then I return the car. And if I return the car in any different condition other than what was stipulated in that lease contract, aka rental contract, then they're going to charge me for it. And ladies and gentlemen, that's what happens when you lease a vehicle. It's just many, 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 many weeks strung together. And you are expected to return the vehicle, and you don't build any sort of equity in that vehicle. Now, I know what people say, oh, but cars are a depreciating asset. Yes, but they also have use. They have a value to you. They're able to get you from point A to point B. So hopefully you're getting something out of that use contract that you have for the money that you are paying. And if you are buying that vehicle, then at some point in time, you are finished paying for it. And if it has any use left, it becomes an asset that can be sold to someone else, or becomes an asset that you can get more use out of. And hopefully it doesn't have to keep costing you money. Now, I know sometimes you have to pay for cost of repairs, and that's a whole nother conversation. We talk about that later. But in its simplest form, a lease is just a long-term rental contract, period. And you don't go to Enterprise or any other of the rental car dealerships expecting them to give you something in return when you bring the vehicle back. No, you thank them, and they thank you for using them and not someone else. And that's it. Off you go. So you got your lease vehicle, and how long you leased it for? 3 years, 2 years?
Yeah, so my agreement was 3 years and my monthly payment was $340.
Okay. So when you got to the end of your lease, or excuse me,
Hmm.
when you got to the end of your long-term rental, let's call it what it really is,
Yeah.
you had a choice of either returning the car with the keys and being under the mileage, or they were going to offer you the opportunity to purchase the said vehicle at a pre-negotiated price. Is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
that is correct.
Do you remember your pre-negotiated price?
Oh yeah, $13,270.
You could have also said, no, I'm going to turn it in, and you could go buy another car. How much were you willing to spend on a new car?
Well, actually, just to speak to that question a little bit more, my options given to me were only, hey, purchase a new car or lease a new car with us. It was rarely that we talked about returning mine and walking away, or purchasing mine out.
Oh, yeah, because you're in
So
LA. You need a car. So they just assume. They're like, oh, well,
yeah,
you're going to
yeah,
get a new
really.
car from us, and you don't want this old thing. You've had it for 3 years, right?
No, exactly. That was exactly the attitude that they gave me. And um, I mean, I guess like 3 years ago, me would be very naive and be like, "Oh yeah, we'll totally get a new car," you know. But since I've transformed into actually understanding and organizing my finances, and it was a totally different mentality walking into the dealership today. Well, actually, 2 weeks ago, right? So when I walked in, I knew that I wanted to purchase my car out. They were still really persistent on actually leasing something new or buying something new. Yeah, so that's kind of what how
Look
the
at these
experience first
shiny
started.
new cars that have these new
Oh my god.
wheels, and
Yes.
your car
Even
doesn't even it doesn't talk to you in the morning. This car tells you good morning. Don't you
oh
want this one?
yeah. Even when I would bring my car serviced, and I get it, everyone has their job to do, So, but even when I would get my car serviced, and I'm waiting outside and I'm just browsing, it would turn into a whole conversation of like, oh, what's your car right now? Well, this one can do this and this can do that, and we can get you inside of it today. And they were very like
Persistent.
relentless with
Yeah,
it for
yeah, yeah.
sure. So I knew my lease was coming up in September, so I think I started really looking into it around May or June, what I'm gonna do. And I actually started off thinking that I was gonna return the lease because I was like, "Ah, I don't really want to keep the car, like blah blah blah."
I mean, it did get
Um,
hit by a bus.
yeah, got hit by a bus, right? But I was speaking to like a number of people, like what I can do, and my boyfriend was like, "Well, you can always buy used," and I come from a family where like we're just against used cars. Like I never, my parents hate the fact of a used car because they do not know, like they don't like the idea that they don't know where like who used it or what happened to it. Like they can always be lying on Carfax and all that stuff. So I knew like I was like, I was already kind of like reluctant to that idea. But the more I looked into it financially, the more it made sense. And I think that's kind of the conversation, because I asked you, like, hey, what do you think about used cars versus buying new? And you were kind of the one that kind of confirmed those feelings for me, that used sometimes or most of the time is always better.
Yeah, no, and it can be. So I got this from a book called The Millionaire Next Door. I'll make sure to put it in the comments for those that want to pick it up. But The Millionaire Next Door, it's by two authors, and they interviewed dozens upon dozens of millionaires and multimillionaires, and they wanted to find out how, what their buying habits are, and just what sets them apart. And one of the things that they noticed is that overwhelmingly the millionaires rarely purchase new cars. Now, of course, there were people that weren't in their survey. They didn't talk to the people that were ultra rich, with ultra wealthy, that have all the McLarens and all the Hummers and everything else. The cribs style lifestyle. They weren't talking to those people. They're talking more to the bread and butter sort of millionaires, that just the people that have enough, versus those that want to keep buying and buying and getting more.
Right.
And overwhelmingly, as I was saying, they purchase used, and they also tend to purchase vehicles that had low mileage, and ones that had a single owner prior to them. And it just so turns out, if you kind of add that up, you realize that if you're sticking to vehicles that are less than 3 years old, have less than the average mileage on it, so depending on your city or town, somewhere between 30 and 40,000 miles, and had a single owner, a lot of times those vehicles are lease turn-ins. There are people that borrowed, rented the vehicle brand new. More than likely, they did bring it in for all the servicing because it was quote unquote free. And, there's a good history as far as the Carfax is concerned. And then it's time for them to go get the new shiny vehicle that says good morning. So they turn in the lease, and then other people can come and purchase that lease. Now, if you're the car dealership, if someone turns in a lease that the person, like in Mikko's, if Mikko turns in her lease and you said the value of your residual value was 13,500, was that the number?
Well, contractually, that was the buyout amount. But my car is actually worth, I think we talked about it was like 16, 17,000.
Yeah. So that's exactly my point. So if Mikko can purchase the vehicle, the contract says she could purchase it for 13.5. If she turned in that vehicle, gave them the keys, and went and picked something new off the lot, now the dealership has a vehicle that was worth on paper $13,500 to the person that turned it in. How much do you think the dealership's going to sell that vehicle for? And Mikko already gave us the answer. It's probably $15,000 to $16,000 or more, because the dealership is there to make a profit. That's they're in business. Businesses are in business to make a profit, period. So it's actually not in the dealership's best interest to allow Mikko, or hold up their end of the bargain, and allowing her to buy that car for $13,500. So let's pick up the story there. So you're at the dealership and you said, I want to buy my car.
Yes. So I went to the dealership. I actually went to the dealership a couple times because I kept getting calls and texts from them saying, "Hey, come in, come in. We'll appraise your vehicle. We'll let you know how much it's worth. Give you the best deal." And I was like, so I actually went there a couple of times to hear what that would be. And so when I actually decided on something, I went there to hear what the lease buyout would look like. And the moment I arrived, they sat us down, they gave us water. I was with my boyfriend, and they asked for information where they would be running a credit check, even though I guess I can speak to it now, even though I had already planned to buy this out with my credit union sponsored from my job, my current job. And shout out to them because they were fantastic. And I'm really glad that I found them because they're able to give me a really low APR comparatively to other bankings, right? So when I went there, I told them already I had a plan that my credit union's going to do this for me. I'm just here to understand what the buyout process looks like. And I thought, and no one told me otherwise, that like I thought I had to go to the dealership to figure this out. Like I thought like I had to go to the exact same dealership I leased the car at. Like I just like that was my method. So when I arrived there, they asked for my information and I was like, "Oh, like I don't understand why you need this because I already have a credit union that agreed to work with me. I have a pre-approved loan. It's at this interest." So they're like, "Oh, like we just need this to pull up your paperwork." So I gave them just the really basic stuff. And then they came back to me and they gave me that price breakdown that I showed you. This is still before I knew that you didn't have to go to the dealership to buy out your car.
Yeah.
So I just wanted a copy of it because the total was really high, as you like have seen. And I was like, I need time to look at this. I need time to understand this. I'm going to bring it to, the right people to give me explanation because they weren't giving me an explanation. When I asked them, hey, what is this lease buyout fee? Like they wouldn't tell me how it's calculated. Instead, they would give me the reasons that, oh, everyone has to face fees. Like one of the dealership salesperson was like, oh, I pay fees all the time for my house. And they just kind of kept working around the question. So I didn't really have any like real concrete answers. And when I tried asking even for a copy of this page with my price breakdown of my own car, they said they could not provide that to me.
That is insane. Okay, so you were at the dealership. I remember because I got a text message, and the text message said something to the tune of, "Are you familiar with a lease buyout fee?" And I was like, "Yeah," because we paid. So full disclosure, even though we've talked all these things about how bad a lease can be, my wife and I leased a vehicle, and when we did, it made sense at the time. Okay, so like I said, it's not for everyone, but in certain situations, it may make sense. In hindsight, we are happy that we did do it because we're not in love with the car and we'd rather put our money into something else. So, anyways, I knew that there was a fee to transfer a lease because we had just paid one. And it's typically stipulated in your lease contract. It will say exactly what the lease fees are. Now, I think I had you send me a picture of the contract, and it said clearly in the contract that the lease turnover fee was like $350. But at the dealership, they were quoting you a lease buyout fee of $2,995 and DMV fees and taxes of another $2,000. So they were basically asking you for $5,000 on top of your contractually obligated $13,500.
Yes, that is correct.
Wow. And then
Yeah.
wouldn't budge. Oh, no, wait, no. They did budge. Because I think you
Yeah,
countered
when we
them.
were about to walk out the door, they were budging. This is a funny story. This isn't what I told you, but because I was excited to tell you when we had the chance to talk. So I was with my boyfriend, right, and we're at this table, 6 feet apart, and they're describing to us the price breakdown, and they just kept referring like, "We're not making any money off of you. Like this is your car. This is your car. We don't make any money off of this." And my boyfriend and I were just still trying to understand because he's in finance and I'm in finance, so we're both like, I mean, I do contracts for a living. So to be mansplained what negotiation and fees are was very interesting for me. It was a great learning experience. And when we were about to walk out the door, because we weren't having it, because we still can't understand what this $3,000 buyout fee was, um, one of the last questions we asked was, oh, is there any movement on this fee? Can this be negotiated? Can this be changed? And they said, oh, no, that's a fee. Like that, everyone pays that fee. That can't be negotiated. So when we're walking out the door, they're like, hey, how about if we take $400 off? Or like, hey, how about 1,000? And they said that they had coupons. They kept saying the word coupons for like new car users, but they'll use it for us if we do this with them. And we were like, oh no, that's still a lot of money. And like, so they asked me, the last question they asked me was like, hey, what do you want your lease buyout fee to look like? And I said, I don't want it to look like anything at all. Like you already took a lot of money from me for me leasing the car in the first place. And they weren't having it. They kind of just turned around. And so we walked out.
Wow.
Yeah. And this was after the phone call with you. You told me that, like, hey, you never really like that's a really extreme amount. I don't think so. And you also pointed out on the contract, like, that it says this is the amount that you would pay buying out the car, 13,207, I think it was, and plus any taxes and required fees. And I think required was the pinpoint word there, and we were like, this is not a required fee.
That is absolutely what happened when we said this is not required. And then when they budged on it, I was like, oh, yeah, that's get out of there. Get the heck out of there. And so you did. And I think you just called Honda the next day.
Yeah, so when you told me like, hey, you can actually go through like their leasing center, I was like, are you like, oh, like, are they gonna try to do the same thing to me just over the phone? Like that was the first time of me hearing I didn't have to go to the dealership. So when I called their Honda Financial Services, actually, yeah, did I? Actually, no, I found it on their website. It was like in a hidden like area. It was like, if you want to buy out your car, this is what you need to do. And they actually list out the steps really well. And it was under my account with them where make my monthly payments. So it was on their website and I understood the process a little bit better. I talked to my credit union and they confirmed that information. They were kind of confused why I went to the dealership in the first place. They're like, oh, yeah, don't do that. Like, just do this and we'll take care of you. And so that's exactly what I did. I didn't even end up calling Honda themselves. I just did it all online and I did the correct forms. My credit union walked me through like next steps. And I am at a loan amount of $12,209. That is the current loan I ended up taking out.
So you went from potentially having to pay $18,000 for something that it wasn't already yours, but you already had possession of. They were going to charge you almost
Yeah.
$5,000 worth of fees, when in actuality you went to your credit union, just went online to your
Yeah.
lease department online. And actually, I have the numbers here. They gave you the principal payoff was $13,209.75. You
Okay. Yeah.
gave a down payment of $1,000, good for you, which covered just about all of your sales taxes. And that was one of the things I mentioned to you. I said, don't finance sales taxes. For what? It's a one-time expense. Just pay your sales taxes up front. And you came
Mhm.
pretty close to doing that. And they charged you a $15 title transferring fee.
Yeah, which
So
the dealership charged me 80 for that. So their price breakdown was my principal payoff amount, 13,200. Then it was lease buyout fee, $3,000. And then it was DMV title transfer, 80 bucks. And then the taxes were actually $600 more than what I actually had to pay my credit union.
exactly.
Really strange. And
That
then the
we call that
registration I did
really
on my
fraud is what I call it, but I don't know. That was probably a strong word. I shouldn't use that.
own.
Really deceptive sales practices there.
Yeah, I honestly would question whether or not that is ethically allowed. But moving forward, it was very interesting. And yeah, I'm at a 12,000 loan sum. Like that included my down payment and, like you said, my taxes. And then I ended up doing the car registration myself, just on the DMV website online. So I think like, well, now that I know that, I would only really be paying the dealership for them to process this for me, when really the processing wasn't even that bad, me doing it myself.
Got it. So the lesson there, everyone, if as I'm hearing it, is if you are at the end of your lease, you may be better off working directly with your lending institution, which in Mikko's case it was Honda Financial Services, not the Honda dealership, but working directly with your lending institution to determine what your options are before you go drive onto the lot. Because you got to remember, the car lots, they are looking to make a profit. The bank is already making its profit because you've been paying them this whole time.
Yeah.
Okay. So by circumventing the dealership, Mikko is able to save herself almost $4,000. And that is significant. That is a financial lesson that would have hurt for years to come, because now she would be upside down in that vehicle tremendously. if she had
Yeah.
taken the route through the dealership. So hats off to you, Mikko. I'm so excited this worked out for you. And thank you so much for coming and sharing the story with everyone. If you have a lease vehicle, Mikko did the right thing. She started looking at her options almost 6 months before her lease ended. Okay. And it was because she was doing all this research and asking all these questions, she was able to reduce the amount of urgency so that she could pause and think about her options
Oh
and
yeah.
and look at alternatives as well, instead of being in that situation like she was the first time when her and her mother purchased or borrowed a vehicle and
Yeah.
said, I just need a car with payments I can afford.
Yeah. No,
Because
totally.
in need that you will be able to afford whatever they're willing to let you drive off the lot in.
Well, for people right now, like with this whole current situation, I know you actually, I don't know if you actually end up moving forward, but you said you had a lease, and I'm sure maybe other people have lease. I've considered actually returning my lease a little bit early because I'm not really driving anywhere. Is that something you would recommend?
Yes, you're correct. We had a lease and we turned it in early, and we were in a similar situation as you, where the street value of our vehicle was more than the residual value of our lease, or the value that our lease was going to be, the vehicle was going to be when we turned it in. So once I was armed with that information, and by the way, I armed myself with that information by just going on cars.com, and I searched for our vehicle with all the same specs, everything. Turns out we happened to have a vehicle where there weren't that many of them made and there weren't that many of them available to be purchased. So that was driving the price up a little bit from what I could see on cars.com. From there, I went on to carmax.com, scheduled an appointment. It was all touchless and, didn't have to see anybody. Well, I saw people, but didn't have to do anything but just drive to CarMax, let someone walk around the car, check the odometer, check under the hood, and take some pictures. And 15 minutes later, they gave me my appraisal. That appraisal was good for, I think, 7 days or something like that. Let's see, we weren't, but I used it, took that information home, sat down with Alicia, and we crunched the numbers. Now, we were turning in the lease early, so that meant that we would still be obligated to pay the remaining payments, okay, that we still had left on the contract. But because they were offering us more money than what the value or the purchase value would be, then the amount that we owed, instead of owing 6 months, we really only owed like 3.5 because of that extra amount. The other thing we took into account is if we remove a vehicle from our insurance premiums were going to go down by about 30%. And there was all the other wear and tear and stuff like
that's
that
great.
to take into account. And so armed with all that information, we just turned it in. And, we hightailed, and we never went back to the dealership. We had a Kia. Our dealership was in California, so we didn't even have an option to go to the dealership, but we did everything at CarMax. And CarMax said, hey, based on
That's
your
awesome.
residual value, you owe us $2,100. Like, I wrote that check, gave it to him, and I said, come on, babe, let's hurry up and go before they realize what they've done. And we took out. So, and a week later, we got a thank you letter from Kia for, being such a great lesser, whatever you want to call it, because they had their money. And that was it. So, but yes, if you're someone, if you're out there and you've got a lease, you may have options. Okay. Don't wait until, you're missing a payment or until, your lease is about to end within 30 days or less than that of it ending. Just take a weekend, research what your options are, go online, go directly to the bank. Whomever you're leasing from, they're obligated to give you the information that you need on how you can terminate your lease. You just have to ask them.
Yeah. And I would even say further, like generational Z and millennials. Like this is something I totally unfamiliar with because it's not really broadcast to us. But I have a lot of friends that are interested in leasing cars because they think it's cheaper. And I used to be one of them, and so now I know. And like I wish like and hope that this kind of information that's so personal and so like relevant to our lives becomes more of a thing, like especially for like Gen Z, because I definitely think that this was a topic I shared with a lot of my friends, and they were like, "Oh wow, like I've never heard of that before."
Replace Algebra 2 with basic
Right.
with some basic financial literacy, you know, the difference in taxable income, some stocks and bonds, some, you know, buying versus leasing a car. And by the way, for those of you that got hung up a little bit earlier when Mikko said APR, I wrote it down and forgot to come back. APR stands for annual percentage rate. That is the interest that is being charged when you borrow money. So anytime you borrow money, there's typically some sort of APR. Now, sometimes it's zero for a limited amount of time. But the APR is the annual percentage rate that you are being charged in order to borrow that money. So, all right. Well, I'm going to let you get back to it. Again, thank you so much for spending some time. And yeah, indeed. So this will probably be out in about a week or so. So, but you'll get an email from Saida when it's all done, so you can tell all your friends to tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. Thanks for joining us on the Money Script podcast. Be sure to check out our other episodes, subscribe, follow, and give us 5 stars. Continue to send your financial questions on Twitter or Instagram at the Money Script. Go to moneyscriptwealth.com and schedule your complimentary consultation to discuss your specific goals and concerns. Financial advisory and investment management services are offered by Money Script Wealth Management PLLC, a registered investment advisory firm registered in the state of Texas and California and other states where exempt. The Money Script LLC and the Money Script Wealth Management PLLC and guests of the episode may have interest in the investments mentioned today. The opinions and views are expressed here are for informational purposes only. This material is educational in nature and should not be deemed as a solicitation for any specific product or service. All investments involve risk and a significant loss of principal. The Money Script nor Money Script Wealth Management offer tax or legal advice. Please consult your tax advisor or attorney for specific advice about your situation. Until next time.